Hello and welcome to Casual Veteran Gamer. In the video today I'm going to be going through the level 2 Druid spells, and just a quick note that I will be starting from this point when I'm reloading and capturing all my videos, so I'm only going to be showing footage from combats and areas nearby here. Also, if you haven't already checked out my videos on the cantrips and level 1 spells for Druids, I do recommend you go see those. I'm going to be going through these spells in mostly alphabetical order, not in any order of ranking or anything like that, and do keep in mind these are my own personal opinions, and do let me know if you think I'm wrong. Barkskin. Attach a willing creature to toughen its skin and increase its armor class to 16. It lasts as long as you've got concentration. Let's go check out Gale now. Armor class 16, right, seems decent, but honestly, this shouldn't work. Yeah, still 16. It's quite funny, it says 16, but then the calculation there is 10 plus 2 plus 3, which is 15. Barkskin is a really bad spell. It's one of the few very bad spells that Druids get at level 2. Because I may as well use Mage Armor. And now, I admit, maybe not everyone wants a wizard in their team. Fair enough. But this is far worse than Mage Armor though, because there's no bonuses to the 16, it's stuck at 16, whereas Mage Armor you get your dexterity bonus added as well. And Barkskin requires, this is the real kicker for me, which what makes it just really bad, is it requires concentration. Even if we weren't competing with the likes of, let's go back to the Druid, with the likes of Flaming Sphere, Moonbeam, maybe even Flaming Blade, I don't have it currently prepared. Flame Blade. 3, and Spike Growth, 4 generally okay or very good concentration spells at level 2 only. At level 1 we've still got Fog Cloud, maybe Fairy Fire, although I must say Fairy Fire kind of drops down compared to these level 2 spells. Why am I going to use a level 2 spell slot and concentration just to make someone's armor class 16? It's not that great. It's really not amazing at all. And you can apply it to, let's go to the bear. Alright, in the bear, its armor class is normally 12, which is its natural armor. Thankfully I've got 2 druids here, so I can cast Barkskin on the bear. Alright, its armor class is 16, as very much as expected. And that's all fine and dandy, but what happens when I eventually lose concentration? It's going to go back down to 12. And again, I may as well use Mage Armor. Now, the bear's armor class should still be 16, because that's from Barkskin. But without Barkskin, its armor class is 15. 1 less. And you get to use only a level 1 spell slot, which 2 of them can be recovered for a wizard, and doesn't require concentration. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. Maybe you want to use it on the bear. The bear becomes a bit more tanky. It's got a decent number of hit points, 30, not bad. But in all honesty, you're going to want to be using this on something else. Bear's armor class is now 15 because of Mage Armor, and in case you haven't watched my shorts video about this, one other benefit of Mage Armor is it's now at 19 for this Druid, and it shouldn't be 19, it should only be 16, but the Mage Armor still applies. Darkvision. Inflicts Darkvision. Grant a creature the ability to see in the dark out to a range of 60 feet. Before I cast this, I do want to make sure anyone who thinks about casting this, that you do cast it on a character who needs it. I have 4 characters here. We've got Shadowheart, High Elf, High Half Elf, and we've got CVG, Wood Elf, both of which have Darkvision already. So this would be completely pointless on them. And then I've got 2 humans, my Tav, and I've got Gale. And they don't have Darkvision. We can see the difference when I switch between the characters. So between Tav and CVG, Right, that's with Darkvision, that's without. Right, you can cast it on other creatures, it doesn't have to be just yourself. So now she has Darkvision. Brilliant. Right, can see out to a range of 40 feet. Although this says out to a range of 60 feet, there seems to be a typo difference in these two ranges. I'm quite certain it is 60 feet, it's the same as the CVG here. One lovely thing about the spell, at least, is that it doesn't require concentration. So you can just cast this on 1 or 2 characters. And let's see what difference it makes. I don't have any enemies here, I've already cleared this place out. But if I've got Gale here, who's going to try and cast Firebolt onto Tav, you can see he's got disadvantage. Target is obscured by shadows. And then if I've got Tav, she's attacking from shadows, so she gets advantage. In fact, just to prove that this works, I'm going to go put Darkvision onto Gale, and we'll see if he loses his disadvantage. Let's move him a bit further away. Alright, so he doesn't have disadvantage anymore, even though he is attacking from the shadows, but because the target has got I've got advantage because I'm hiding. Because the targets have got Darkvision themselves, they don't get the bonus of attacking from shadows. And then if I lastly go back to Tav, she's lost her disadvantage. She's lost her advantage for attacking from shadows. So to give this spell a rating, I find it quite difficult actually to pin down a particular rating. So it's good because it doesn't require concentration and allows your humans and halflings and Githyanki, I can't remember all the races without Darkvision, but those are the main ones I think. You know, it allows them to see in the dark, which also is just nice from an aesthetic point of view when playing the game, I find. Can give you advantage if you're against an enemy that doesn't have Darkvision, and helps protect against shots coming from the shadows against you as long as they're within range of the Darkvision. However, as good as that all sounds, firstly, it's a level 2 spell slot. But plenty of other spells I could be casting with my level 2 spell slot. And secondly, there are lots of other spells to create light. Right, Shadowheart herself has got the light cantrip, which isn't exactly the same as having Darkvision, I will admit. But considering it doesn't require a level 2 spell slot, it is a cantrip, it's probably more valuable. So it's probably not the best idea to make it cast light on everyone. So I think overall I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, bang in the middle, because there certainly are times you could use it to your advantage and get rid of some small disadvantages. But at the end of the day, I feel like there's probably a better use of level 2 spell slots. I think it's also lastly worth pointing out that large parts of the game are above ground, so Darkvision wouldn't be useful. I know there are large parts of the game underground as well, so it's not always going to be a spell that you need to keep prepared. Enhance ability is next. So bestows a magical enchantment upon an ally, and you click on the spell and then you have 6 choices, 1 for each ability. So inflict Owl's Wisdom, which gives you advantage on wisdom checks. Then we get advantage on intelligence and charisma checks. Then when we come to the more physical stats, we do actually get some extra bonuses as well. So for Cat's Grace, you get advantage on dexterity checks, and only takes half damage from falling. Bull's Strength, gain advantage on strength checks, and its carrying capacity is doubled. And then for Constitution, you gain an extra 7 temporary hit points. So it sounds like it might be alright, you know, advantage on checks, but overall it's really not that amazing. Because first of all, you only get to choose one type of check, and it's not like you can change it after you've started to cast it. One good thing is that this is indefinite until next long rest, as long as you maintain concentration, which is another massive downside for this spell. As with several other of the level 2 druid spells, if they require concentration, generally the rating is going to be a bit lower because there are some really amazing level 2 druid spells that require concentration. The best use of this is probably outside of combat. Inside of combat, you're almost never making wisdom, intelligence, or charisma checks. These aren't the same as saving throws. If this applied to saving throws, it'd be stronger. But this is just ability checks. So things like perception, do you notice something, arcana checks, nature checks, things like that. So even in combat, these dexterity, strength, and constitution checks very rarely happen. In a tabletop version, these checks would come into play maybe with grappling, but there isn't even any grappling in the game, so you can't use them there. So the half damage from falling and double carrying capacity and gain 7 temporary hit points. They're not really that good, not really worth using the spell for those. Because if you're going to use a spell to half falling damage, get another character to cast Featherfall for a level 1 spell, and that covers the whole group. Carrying capacity doubled, rarely do you get up to the maximum capacity. It's not impossible. I have had it happen on a couple of characters, but I don't want to use a level 2 spell slot and my concentration just to double the carrying capacity. And gain 7 temporary hit points. Do you know what? That's not so bad, because this could stack with something like Aid from Cleric. But let's just show you this happening. So I've got to pick the right ability. Now, I'm fairly sure if I have... I think intelligence would be what I need. One nice thing about this is you can cast it on another character. It doesn't have to be the caster. Right, and then we've got these...
Something tore right through these people.
these gnolls, hyenas.
Stand a chance.
Bones snap.
Arcana failed. We don't get to see the roll made though right now. Yeah, I can't actually see the check that was made. To be honest, the best use of enhanced ability will be when you're in maybe the Druid Grove, maybe you want charisma checks, but even then it's not going to be great. I mean, overall, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's pointless in combat, essentially. Uses up the spell slot, uses up concentration. For example, I'll get to this spell soon, right? I'd much rather, in combat, have a different spell. I've lost my concentration. I now don't have enhanced ability. And I use the spell slot just for that. Outside of combat, if you know you're going to be in a situation where you're using ability checks, this is good, but you probably want to have a long rest after using it. I know this list is generally going to be alphabetical, but I'm going to cheat a bit here since I've just shown you enhanced ability and I've just started a combat and I cast Flaming Sphere. I'm just going to switch around Flaming Sphere and Flame Blade. Let's actually have a look at the spell in a bit more detail. So summon a Flaming Sphere that deals 2d6 fire damage to nearby enemies and objects. Also sheds bright light in 20-foot radius and dim light for an additional 20 feet. It has a dexterity saving throw and concentration is required. So this is one of these spells that I think every time you're playing a druid, you probably want it prepared. So I've just cast it, and it hasn't dealt any damage yet. But the Flaming Sphere does have its own turn in combat. It will get it later. And amazingly, the Flaming Sphere is completely immune to all and any type of damage. And sometimes enemies will go and attack it. What I suggest you do if you're using Flaming Sphere with your druid is don't put the druid in harm's way. You really don't want to drop concentration on this spell. So what I'm going to try and do, I don't know if I've got enough movement for this. Right, so I've got a wood elf with the Crusher's rings, so his movement speed is really quite high. He's moving slowly because he's slightly encumbered, but his movement speed is still the same. I'm going to hide, so hopefully the hyenas don't go after him. So that bloated hyena, because it finished its turn within 5 feet of the Flaming Sphere, it took 2d6 damage. And we'll see here, fire damage creatures standing within 5 feet of a flaming sphere will take 2d6 damage at the end of its turn. Which is probably the one downside to Flaming Sphere, is it does create this aura where enemies will take damage, but only if they end their turn next to it, not if they start their turn next to it. On a successful save, it will still take half damage. So here is now, it's the Flaming Sphere's turn. And it has 30 feet of movement. So it can move, and using up some movement, what it can do is use this ability Ram. It uses a bonus action, slam into an enemy creature or object to deal 2d6 fire damage. They get to make a dexterity saving throw. Do also note that it can jump, and jump here doesn't use a bonus action, it just uses speed. So, there we are. What you can do, I probably won't be able to show you in this battle, but you can have the Flaming Sphere just jump off the side of somewhere, and it will still survive. It won't get hurt by anything. Hit for 6 damage. It made its saving throw. Well, sorry, it failed its saving throw, so it took full 6 damage. And I'm keeping my Druid far away, the one who's cast it. If you want to be really clever, what you could do is have the rest of the party hide as well, so all the enemies just go after the Flaming Sphere. And because of that we can do this, this spell deserves a 10 out of 10. I'm actually going to start doing that now. So start running away and hiding with everyone, apart from the Flaming Sphere. Because here, look, it's going after the Flaming Sphere. It's been soul numbed. Can't take bonus actions or reactions. Okay, that is actually a little bit annoying, but still, it's not that bad. Because the silly thing with the game is, once the characters are out of range and they're hiding, they don't get targeted. So this soul numbed is actually quite bad for the Flaming Sphere in one sense, because it takes a bonus action to use its ram. I'm just going to roll it closer. As soon as the Flaming Sphere's gone past something, it loses the Flaming Aura. So it's up here, and hopefully they're going to start going after the Flaming Aura. So I've just managed to hide the whole party, apart from the Flaming Sphere. And now I'm probably not going to be hurt. All in all, top tier spell, you probably want to start your combats with this and have the rest of the party hidden, and then you're going to be very safe. Quick tip for Flaming Sphere is you've got this little option on the right, ablaze. So if you're near your party, you can actually turn off the Flaming Aura. It doesn't take an action or bonus action, just on and off at will. Flame Blade. Conjure a flaming scimitar in your hand that deals 3d6 fire damage. It sheds bright light in a 10-foot radius, dim light in a 20-foot radius, concentration required. The blade can be equipped and unequipped and equipped again, but has to stay on the spellcaster's person. So while you've got concentration, you'll have the blade, which means you can cast it ahead of time. And we can just double check what they said. So I've got the flame blade there, and I can change it for, let's just say, the club. And then, quite interestingly, I can take the shield, the offhand, make it the flame blade. Good thing about this is weapons in the offhand only do damage from the weapon, they don't add your modifier, but flame blade doesn't have a modifier, so you can just have this in your offhand. And then, quite interestingly, although this won't last forever, we can cast Shillelagh if you've got a one-handed club. So now, let's just pause the game so Shillelagh doesn't run out. I've got a weapon that does 1d8 plus 4 bludgeoning, which will overcome resistances, and then 3d6 fire damage. Oh, by the time you get Flame Blade, you don't come across creatures that are resistant to fire damage very much, so it's not so much of a downside. So yeah, I'm going to show you it in a fight, and I think it's generally quite good. I'm going to try and initiate combat just by hitting, only because I do want to show you how well Flame Blade can do. Let's just pick this person. So of course all the normal melee modifiers apply for your chances to hit. So backstab, being from hidden, well, high ground doesn't normally apply to melee. So because I've got it in turn-based mode, thankfully nothing's quite happened yet, I got a critical hit with the Shillelagh, which is obviously very, very nice, and I rolled very well on the damage. And the fire damage here is 3d6, which is okay. So obviously this isn't necessarily going to be able to happen with most combats that you're going to be in, just running around swinging at people. Oh, another critical hit, that was lucky. Unfortunately, it was on the first attack again. But this can actually critical hit to make you do 66 fire damage, which is really high. There we are, combat's actually starting now. I can really ramp up the amount of melee damage you can do in melee with your Druid. But can be in a bit of trouble here, right? Because my armor class is only 17. I've already got the scale mail +1, probably one of the better of the two Druids I've got, the better choice. You could actually equip yourself with a shield instead. Alright, got an armor class of 19. And this happens to be a circle of the land, a circle of the coast, which grants the mirror image, which is obviously very good because now my armor class 28 for the first hit that misses and is going to go down. But you can really ramp up your armor class. One of the benefits of Flame Blade is that it is a bonus action. So if you do drop concentration, you really want to use it again, you can. But overall, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because it's concentration. And okay, I've used up my level 2 spell slots. In this particular fight, a Moonbeam here would probably kill all 3 goblins. And a Flaming Sphere would also take away some of the heat from the sky. The main downside to this isn't necessarily that it fights with concentration for the other spells, but it requires concentration and requires you to be in melee range, which means you're going to be taking more hits, so you're much more likely to drop concentration than the other spells that use concentration. So it's nice, it's got a decent amount of damage. You can combine it with Shillelagh, try and get a high armor class, but there are probably other spells that would suit you better. But not a bad spell by all means. Heat Metal. Inflicts heat metal, causing metal weapons you see to glow red hot. The creature holding the weapon takes 2d8 fire damage and receives disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the start of your next turn. They get a Constitution saving throw to see whether they take damage or not. And then concentration is required. Last 10 turns. I feel like this sounds a tiny bit better than it is in reality. The damage of 2d8 per round if they fail the Constitution saving throw is alright, so let's cast it there. Well, I just happened to kill them in one go, which wasn't really what I wanted, because I wanted to show you the debuff as well. I do have another Druid here, so that's probably one of the best uses of Heat Metal, although it is a level 2 spell slot to kill just one enemy. But, so I want to use Heat Metal again. I can't use it on either of these goblins because they're holding wooden weapons. So this won't work on beasts, any monstrosities. It only works on enemies with metal weapons, and there aren't, in my opinion, there aren't enough to warrant the constant use of the spell or having the spell constantly prepared. So the damage is okay. One thing I don't think you should lose sight of though is the fact that it provides a debuff, and this debuff happens whether they pass or fail the Constitution saving throw. So if you have got a particularly difficult enemy with a metal weapon, I think you should seriously consider using this on them, because you deal damage every round and then they have disadvantage on their attack rolls. And there aren't many things that can inflict debuffs on the enemies. There is Bane, of course. Overall, I'm going to give it... It's a bit different to my shorts video, but I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's not so high because there are other amazing level 2 spells that I could cast instead. So in this instance, okay, Moonbeam isn't amazing because it's a bit too far apart. maybe I'd want to cast Flaming Sphere instead, or Spike Growth would be very helpful here. Also, the damage only gets applied to a single creature, whereas lots of the other spells, obviously Druid spells, that have concentration, have high damage. So for example, Heat Metal is 2d8, but Moonbeam is 2d10, and it's an AoE. Spike Growth looks like it's only 1d4, but it's 1d4 for every 5 feet that they move. So enemies can take this more than once, and it's an AoE. Flaming Sphere is 2d6, not the highest, but again, it has an AoE and other benefits of Flaming Sphere as well. So a tiny bit disappointed with Heat Metal, but if you've got a particular enemy that it is good for, this is really going to shine. Alright, in the same fight as Heat Metal, we've got Hold Person up next. Paralyze a humanoid. It's very important because this means you cannot paralyze just anything you want to, making it unable to move or act, attack or saving throws. Wisdom, concentration required. At the end of each of its turns, the creature can try to free itself. This is the sort of spell either works or it doesn't. When it works, it's actually really, really good. If it doesn't work, then you've completely wasted your spell slot. Let's just see the chances of this working. On goblins, measly little creatures, I've got a 60% chance here. This one's a novice of the absolute, so the reason their saving throw is higher is because assuming their wisdom is higher. So wisdom is 14, and then this goblin's wisdom is 8. So when wisdom is 8, that means it's got a negative modifier to its saving throw, and it's still only 60%. That's 2 out of 5 times this isn't going to work. 3 out of 5 times it will on kind of one of the lowest wisdom scores you'll come across. Some animal, although it doesn't work on animals, but there are creatures with very high wisdom scores in the game. So we're really careful who you use this on. So I'm going to try and make this work. I'm going to save it now in case I need to record again. So it failed. Alright, back in a second. Let's try again. Of course, of course. Third time lucky. Nope. Nothing to say. At last, right. So now, Hold Person paralyzed. At the end of each turn, makes a wisdom saving throw. On success, the status is removed. What isn't shown here? Oh, I just noticed they've got bless, which made their saving throws a bit higher. What isn't mentioned here is what paralyzed does. So, let me try and show you that. So something that paralyzed doesn't tell you that it does is that every melee attack will have a 100% chance to be a critical hit. So for example, Shadowheart, I wouldn't normally be using her necessarily to attack. I could have maybe used Slash as well. Doesn't even matter, she rolled 19. It's a critical hit. When someone is paralyzed or unconscious on the ground, if there's an attack made from a melee attack made from within 5 feet, it's going to be a critical hit. So this spell, if you use it wisely, it can be good, but generally, like overall at the moment, I'm not going to rate it very highly because the fact it is a saving throw which can be passed relatively easily. You could decrease the enemy's saving throws by casting Bane first, but if you're having to cast a level 1 spell to make a level 2 spell useful, this maybe not the best use. Also, it's not going to be very useful on targets with low hit points, because I may as well have cast Moonbeam in this particular instance. This is really bad use, but if you've got an enemy with a high number of hit points and is a humanoid, it's probably worth the risk. But overall though, I'm going to give it 5 out of 10. because it's not going to be useful on most enemies, and lots of enemies currently with lots of hit points aren't humanoid, so you can't even use it on them. And it's very difficult to have a high chance of success for hold person to work. I know some of you will be like, oh wow, I used it in this situation, it was really good, very helpful, but you're taking like a 55% chance to save yourself maybe. I think it's probably best used, as already mentioned, high value targets, like high hit point targets, and probably with a cleric or someone else using Bane on that creature, just to increase that chance to hit. But if it works, it can be really good. The one last downside to it is, if you're unlucky, it might only last one turn. At the end of the creature's turn, they might pass a saving throw, and then that's it. The effect of Paralyze is finished. Maybe that's enough for what you wanted to do, but for a level 2 spell slot, it's probably not the wisest use. Lesser Restoration, remove 1 disease or condition afflicting a creature. Very simple, takes an action, no concentration or anything required. So, the spell doesn't describe exactly what it does, because I would argue that having Hunter's Mark Quarry is a condition. It's listed under conditions. What I think it really means to say is things like diseases or being poisoned as well would be another use for this. I mean, the good thing about Lesser Restoration is generally you won't be using it inside combat, it won't be needed. So if you need it outside of combat, you can just prepare it and use it. And it doesn't require concentration, just single spell slot. You can use it on any party member. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, because I find I don't need to use it very frequently. But it's nice to have. And it's not like you're a wizard, so it's not choosing which spells to actually have the ability to prepare. You can just prepare at any point. The only thing you really need to do is make sure that you don't forget that you've got it, that it is an option. Moonbeam, level 2 evocation spell. Call down a silvery beam of pale light. Any creature that enters the beam or starts its turn in the light takes 2d10 radiant damage. This has got a constitution saving throw, but even if they pass that saving throw, they still take half damage. And you can use your bonus action. No, you can use your action to move the beam 60 feet. So, the first thing to note is actually the area is very small. It's one of the smallest AoEs, I think, currently in the game. But you can check whether something is in an AoE or not, depending on whether they get highlighted. Also, the red circles beneath them get extra sort of arrows pointing towards them. This isn't necessarily the best situation to be using Moonbeam, because the Druid casting it is the one right at the front, getting all the attacks, so they can drop concentration. But let's just cast it here. So, one lovely thing about Moonbeam is it's 2d10 damage, which is quite high. There are spells with high amounts of damage, but this isn't AoE. So first of all, I've done a decent amount of damage, and then this warg, when it starts its turn here, it will take an additional 2d10, depending on whether it, say, makes a saving throw or not. But if you keep concentration and you don't lose it, whoever you cast it on will take 2 lots of the damage when the Moonbeam first goes on top of them, and then at the beginning of their turn. So ideally, a bit like with some of the other concentration spells, kind of want to be getting away. So I'm not taking any hits. Now I can't use my bonus action to hide, because I just jumped. So I didn't want to go through the fire. So we'll see if Small Claw actually survives. So, took 6 damage. I've still got Spike Growth down. Alright, it didn't get very far. And then I'll show you again on Tav's next turn what we can do with Moonbeam. Alright, so it's Tav's next turn. We can see down here we've got Move Moonbeam. It has to be within 60 feet of Tav. So I've got the choice to move it there, but she would probably move. So I'm going to put it here because I want these two to die. So she's moved forward a bit. And even though Tracker Bal didn't die this turn, on Tracker Bal's next turn, he's going to take damage at the beginning, and he's not certain to die, but very likely to die with such a low number of hit points. So all in all, this is another amazing level 2 Druid spell. This is a 10 out of 10, really. The amount of damage it does is very high. If you can keep your Druid hidden, you're just going to be casting, I would say fire, but, you know, casting damage beaming down from the skies. The only downside is that it takes concentration, and there are other lovely level 2 Druid spells that require concentration. Pass Without Trace, level 2 Abjuration spell, inflicts Pass Without Trace, call forth a veil of shadows and silence that gives you and all nearby companions a +10 bonus to stealth checks. Concentration required. So let's just see it. Right, you don't get to target anyone because it just says all nearby companions. There we are, concentration broken. I was concentrating on Barkskin from before. And now, yeah, this creature and all nearby allies have +10 bonus to stealth checks. Let's just go double check that. Right. Stealth +15, +12, +12, and so on. Which is good. Right, +10 bonus to any ability check is good. But problem is the way stealth works in the game. I also want to point out that this buff only applies if you are nearby. You can see there's a black circle, which is the area of the buff. So you do need to keep your characters close together. But we need to talk a little bit about stealth in general, because press shift. Well, now that I'm in stealth, we can see the cone of vision from this hyena down there. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm really stealthy, but really need to pay attention to this little symbol next to the cursor, this bright sun. And it's a clear area, hiding in an unobscured area, will be caught on sight. So because I'm out in the open, I don't even get the ability to roll a dexterity stealth check. So this +10 bonus is pointless. If this hyena sees me, I'll come out stealth. There's no doubt about it. Right, I'm trying to find an area that isn't over here. Right, so what I'm going to do is going to move into this area over here. Everyone's keeping up. So I'm inside of, behind some foliage in a bit of bush. Lightly obscured. Hiding in the lightly obscured area. Has to roll stealth when caught. This is when the spell would be useful. You're going to get your +10 bonus here. But generally, the way to do stealth in the game is just stay outside of the cone of vision. And you can do that two kind of fairly decent ways. One is make sure you go into turn-based mode. So I've done that now. And then you can see exactly how far you can go on your turn before you get caught. The other thing you can do to change where the cones of vision are. Now the only character in my current party who has this cantrip, Minor Illusion, is Shadowheart, so I'm going to be using her. Isn't available to a Druid. Well, you've had a high off Druid, it'll be available. Right. What's the range? Just about. So put it here. Right, I've turned them all away, but now we're in combat. It's not necessarily the best choice. But instead of risking rolling a stealth check, just stay outside the cone of vision. Maybe it's just my playstyle, maybe other people really love rolling stealth checks unnecessarily, in my opinion. I would also point out that since Shadowheart is always going to be a potential follower, she has Blessing of the Trickster because she's a Trickster domain cleric, and isn't exactly the same, isn't quite as good as Pass Without Trace, but it gives advantage on stealth checks, and takes in action, takes concentration, but it's resourceless, as in we don't need to use a resource, so we can just do it again and again. But for my actual rating for the spell itself, it's not going to be very high. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I don't like the fact it requires concentration, and I get that in the tabletop version it uses concentration, And I feel like in the tabletop version, it's, depending on your DM, it's probably more useful there. Plus, we don't normally need to actually, currently, we don't normally need to creep past anyone, use stealth very often. Maybe that's just my playstyle, maybe some of you out there get massive use out of the spell. But yeah, I don't like its concentration. I don't like the fact it actually applies to stealth, which isn't that useful in the game. And it uses a level 2 spell slot. And we've only got a maximum of 3 available to us within each long rest. I'd much rather save my spell slot for one of the other many concentration spells that druids get. I'm going to cover protection from poison now. Inflicts protection from poison. Touch a creature to neutralise all poisons affecting it, to grant it advantage on saving throws against being poisoned, and to grant it resistance to poison damage. Range 5 feet. Takes an action to cast. Doesn't require concentration and will last until next long rest. So I can cast it on, let's just say, Shadowheart. So protection from poison. Creature has advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and resistance to poison damage. This spell is very situational. If you're in a combat where poison is a problem, this is going to be probably a 9 out of 10. This is really good because it doesn't require concentration. So you can just cast at the beginning of the day if you know you're going to be near some spiders, for example. But the flip side to that is if you're in a combat, such as here, I've got fighting against some gnolls. If I'm in a combat where poison isn't going to be used against me, this is basically a 0 out of 10 because it's a complete waste of a spell slot and doesn't grant any benefit to you. A bit like Lesser Restoration, that either you need it or you don't. There's no middle ground, there's no it being half good. So just save it for the times that you need it, have it as a 9 out of 10. If you don't need it, just don't have it prepared, there's really no need. Next up, I'm going to show spike growth, and I found a position here that's probably very favourable for using spike growth. So what it does is it shapes a piece of ground into hard spikes. A creature walking on the spikes takes 1d4 piercing damage for every 5 feet it moves. It does hit. The spikes are difficult terrain, halving a creature's movement speed, and requires concentration. It's got a relatively good area. So what I can do here, because I've got kind of a choke point, I can put it in the way and get quite a few enemies in here. So there's the area. Now I'm just going to pause it for a second. Now they haven't moved, so they haven't taken any damage, so they haven't seen it as being hostile towards them. So if this situation arises, it probably is a good idea to do what I've just done. Pause it, and then you can get an attack off. Other things you can do, I've shown this in other videos, the idea was given to me, is if you have spike growth, if you can force movement through spike growth, you can deal extra damage on top of the spike growth itself. So what I can do here, it's a bit silly because I'm putting one of my characters up front, but you should be able to handle it. Oh no, let's take the one with maybe the lowest hit points. Two of them got 15, let's just take this one. Hopefully this hits. Oh.
As the symbol glows,
That was not what I intended. But I'm first in the turn order. Exactly what I wanted. So let's try and show this. I missed, of course. I'll try and show you with another ability that knocks them around. So I tried to use Storm Whip, it didn't work. I'm going to try and use Thunder Wave this time. Try and knock them back without hitting my own druid. And they both failed, and you can see spike growth appeared up there. Quickly trying to check the damage. So Sentinel Olak took 2 lots of damage from spike growth. So it looks like Claw... Oh yeah, Claw's hit, yeah. So they both took damage from spike growth because it knocked them through it. So it is a way to help boost your damage. Wait, does that mean? So I'm just going to check. Yeah. Sentinel Olak took 2 damage from 2d8. Never mind. So yeah, spike growth. Yes, jumping through spike growth doesn't add to the damage. If the AI decides to get around that, then, you know, this is probably going to go down a bit. And also do need to keep in mind there are other spells that are useful here. One thing I haven't made too much of a comment on so far actually is the fact it's difficult terrain. So it's going to take ages for these enemies to get through. The radius of spike growth is probably something like a 20-foot radius, approximately. So the dam is around 40 feet, which is pretty good. Could take the enemy up to 2 turns to get across. This enemy here, just walking through, takes ages to get through, does a ton of bit of damage as well. So I've come to the end of recording all of the 12 level 2 spells that all druids get, and you can colour me impressed. There are a decent number of very good spells. I mean, I've given a couple of 10 out of 10s. We've got Moonbeam and Flaming Sphere, both very strong. Spike Growth also very, very strong. But you don't have to just use those. There are other good choices. Flame Blade if you wish. Heat Metal in a few specific circumstances. There's one big loser, Barkskin, and Enhanced Ability isn't that good. But all the other spells have some sort of situational use. Compared to the level 1 spells, the level 2 spells for druids are way better. I'm happy to use my level 2 spell slots on quite a number of the spells here. At the time of recording, I've been doing some live streams without a druid, and I'm really missing having a druid, if I'm honest. Some of these spells, Flaming Sphere, Moonbeam, and Spike Growth especially, really, really want to have them on my team. Do let me know your thoughts, whether I've missed out some important detail, perhaps, about one of the spells. Maybe I've given too much credit to one of these 10 out of 10s. Perhaps you don't use it in the same way, or you don't think it's actually as useful as I've made it out to be. And let me know if I've underappreciated a spell. Maybe you love Pass Without Trace, whereas I think it's fairly awful. Alright, if you made it this far, please do consider subscribing. It is greatly appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.